Good Friday morning. It's WKRK 105.5 FM, 1320 AM, cable TV channel 25, worldwide at country.am. Also, you can find us on those smartphone apps, the WKRK app, Simple Radio TuneIn app, and now, if you have one of those Amazon Alexa boxes, I think they're called the Echo or Dot, you can just say play WKRK, well, after you say Alexa, and it will start playing on that device as well. So we're trying to make it as easy for you to get WKRK in your ears as possible.
There's no excuse.
No excuse. You don't even have to own a radio anymore to listen to WKRK. And it is a Friday morning. And on Friday mornings, we always have the sheriff's office here, and usually it is the sheriff himself, Mr. Derek Palmer.
Good morning.
Good morning. I hear there's an eclipse coming up in several years.
We don't want to talk about it. You go ahead and talk about the eclipse. I'm going to eat my bowberry biscuit.
Those bowberry biscuits are good, aren't they? Yeah. Miss Donna Lynn had left us some treats, and so we've been eating some bowberry biscuits this morning, and we enjoy those too, don't we?
We do.
How's the sheriff's week been?
It's been busy.
Been very, very busy.
It has. It's been a busy week, and the chief deputy has took a little vacation this week, and I have to complain because I had to work this week because he's gone. And
but he does a lot of work.
He does a lot of work. He does a lot of things. Takes a lot of load off of me, and you don't really realize that till people's gone. And when you have people sick in the office and are out or on vacation and those type of things, then you kind of understand kind of what void they leave when they're not there. So, but they'll be back soon, and we glad they had a good vacation. I was worried about them. They were at the beach, and I was worried about the tropical storms and hurricanes and all those kind of stuff coming through. But I just talked to him on the phone right before he came over here, and everything was fine. Only rained a couple nights on them, so
not bad at all.
Everything's good.
Yeah. And we were talking before the show because we've been watching and praying for all those people in the Houston area and surrounding areas about Hurricane Harvey and the devastation that has created. And we were talking about the one in the Atlantic now.
Irma that's coming across. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a bad hurricane. Not that there's a good hurricane, but this one's going to be worse than normal, it looks like. I was watching on Weather Channel last night. It kind of caught my attention, and it's still out in the far Atlantic, but it's already a Category 3 hurricane where there's normally just tropical storms. And they said last night that when it got about to Puerto Rico, somewhere along in the lesser islands there somewhere, that it would sustain 140-mile-an-hour winds by the time it got to there, where normally they're about 70-mile-an-hour winds, so it's going to be double the strength.
Wow.
At that point. And so I guess that everything's up in the air there, which way it'll go, whether it'll go north toward Florida, toward the Carolina coast, out in the ocean, or go to the Gulf. And I guess worst case scenario is going to the Gulf right now, because if it does, they said it'll only pick up strength and get stronger. So it's just, you feel for all those people down there, and you know that when you live in those areas, there are things you have to deal with. But when you look on TV and you see the devastation and the things that's going on down there in Texas, primarily there around the Houston area and on up North Texas and on over to Louisiana, it just makes your heart break when you see some of those things that's going on down there and realize that those people's lost everything they have, lost all their homes and possessions and some their families and everything else, and it's just heartbreaking to watch it.
I have a friend who used to live in Murphy, but now she lives in Houston, and she was thankfully okay and spared most of the damage, but she said it was extremely humbling just to see the experiences and how many people have already died from this situation.
Yeah. I don't know what the toll is this morning. I know yesterday it was up to 33, I think, or something, that they confirmed casualties because of the storm, and but they expected that to grow as waters go down and finding people, and water vehicles that are submerged becoming back up where people can see in them and things of that nature. So we know there was at least one police officer lost his life down there, a police sergeant that had left in the middle of the night to try to help, and I think had drove into a sinkhole or something of that nature and drowned. And according to the police chief out there, it was so the currents and stuff was so strong they couldn't recover his body, so they had to station patrol officers there just to stay with the car until the waters could go down to retrieve his body out of it. And there's just so much devastation going on, but you can always see good things happening. And one of the things when I was at church Wednesday night, I talked to the church a little bit about this, that When you see all the bad things that's going on around us and in our world, it was just about a week or two ago that everything you saw on TV was negative and about racial tensions and statues and people fussing and fighting and throwing things at each other and arguing and hurting each other. But even though this devastation happened in Texas, then you see people of all races and all colors holding hands and helping each other and being there for each other. And so even in bad times, you can see good things come out of it. And
that's very true.
And it's good to see people come together, and help each other in those times. And it's good to know that it's not just here in Cherokee County that people do that, but all across our nation, people will still be willing to help each other.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. One of the things that some folks in our area are already trying to do a collection drive.
Right.
And right now, the latest we've heard is financial donations are being needed more than supplies, mainly because the area is flooded. There's not a lot of storage space for items that are coming in. And let's talk about how people can help.
Well, before we get into that, I do want to say this too, talking about storage space. I noticed also as I was monitoring the weather last night, there's also another tropical storm brewing there in the Gulf. And there's a good possibility that later this week they could get several more inches of rain in the same area. So you potentially could see those flood waters coming back up again. And so keeping that in mind, I know people are quick to jump in and waters and diapers and all the non-perishable things that you want to send on there and help, and that's good that we can do that. However, like you say, they're running out of places on there with storage space and places to put things that people are bringing. We got a notification from our Sheriff's Association this week, and they have been in contact with the Texas Sheriff's Association. And the Texas Sheriff's Association was requesting to put out to our people in our states and our areas to please not send anything at the moment and please not come down there right now. For the reason being is while things are still underwater, they have no restaurants, they have no places to prepare food and things of that nature, and they're concentrating on trying to help the victims. And things that we don't understand, we may go with good intentions, but when we send, say an extra 50,000 people to the area with nowhere to eat and no food or anything like that, then it becomes overburden the rescuers down there to try to provide food for the help and food for the victims and all these type of things. So, and not just providing it, but preparing food. And so that becomes another secondary problem to the situation down there. So right now they're requesting basically just do the monetary donations at this point until the floodwaters recede, and when the floodwaters kind of come down and they can get some more permanent places to house things and to house supplies and stuff, then they'll be more than willing to accept all this stuff and get it down there. But even now, even though they have supplies and have things, it's even hard to get to the people because the people are in the emergency facilities. And even in the emergency facilities, they don't have a place to store all this stuff to give to these people at this point. So, and if they do give these supplies to these people, what are these people going to do with it? Where are they going to take it to? So, basically, they're requesting to give it a few more days to kind of let everything come down, let the waters recede, and so they can kind of get a grip on everything down there.
Not trying to bring up the eclipse again, but just
let it go.
Just a few months ago, we were preparing for a huge influx of people, and we were preparing for the very worst.
Right.
And these people in the Houston area are under the worst now, and that extra volume of people that we were preparing for our small, it makes a big difference when they're trying to do the recovery efforts.
Right, it is, and when you think about our efforts, the things we were doing here, there's a prepared event where you had vendors and you had food and you had at least places to stay, whether it's an open field or a tent. You still had somewhere someone could stay. But you take all the problems that we were preparing for and exist, and now you have an emergency situation that came up out of the blue that people didn't have time to prepare for. And then you have literally water covering everything to where there's nowhere to put people and nowhere to put supplies and things of that nature. So it just brings that added problem.
It's creating a new emergency on top of the emergency.
It is.
So, but I know the people really, really want to help, and they have. We have some of the most wonderful people in the world living right here. And if you do want to donate financial, and that can get into the right hands to help people. And there's a website that people can go to called Charity Navigator, and I use it a lot of times just to see, because if I'm giving money to help people, I don't want to give it to a charity where the CEO is making $1 million. I just want to make sure that all the money I'm giving is going to help the victims. So you can check out those charities.
And that's a good place to go, because there's charities out there, whether it's Red Cross or Salvation Army, and even, you saw these NFL players have set up these charities and raising money. And so there's different things out there that's legitimate, but it's good to go to some of these websites that'll point you to the right places as to what is legitimate, because unfortunately, we do have people that takes advantage of these situations, and there are bogus charity sites out there and GoFundMe accounts and things of that nature that people will post that are not in need, that will just try to make some money off of it and try to make money off the situation. So if you're going to donate, try to donate to a reputable site or somewhere that you can research and know where the money's going to.
And you can use Better Business Bureau to research some of these organizations. And we've posted on our Facebook a link to the Charity Navigator so that you can look at some of the associated hurricane website charities and find out which one is the best one. And there's different. There's food banks. There's for children. There's these sites to help the pets, because a lot of people are not even thinking about the pets or the children at this time. They're just thinking about the disaster in food, but there's so many different needs that need to be met.
Well, when you talk about the needs that are out there, you also got to keep in mind too that this is literally going to be a year-long to 2-year recovery. One of the things that people don't think about when you're preparing for disaster, and like we do here in Cherokee County, we prepare for flooding, we prepare for tornadoes, we prepare for all the things here that could possibly happen, and have some kind of plan for those already in effect. But the things that people don't realize is once those floodwaters recede and once it's over with, especially in a city situation like you do in Houston, you've got all of the disease that comes afterwards. You've got the sanitation issues, you've got the disease issues, you've got all kind of health problems that come from that. You've got from when the waters recede, you've got homes that people will be going back into that may have poisonous snakes in them, and wildlife and alligators and all kind of different things, that they won't anticipate when they go back, that they could receive injury or health issues because of that. So when you think about all the things that are out there, it's more than just the recovery project itself. It's more than just building a new house, or it's more than just buying a new car. There's a lot of other issues that go with that just mud in the streets that have to be cleared off. And, when you think about the flood waters, you've got septic systems that's overflown. You've got cemeteries that have come up. You've got, just all kind of different things that creates health issues. And so when you're talking about donating, it doesn't mean that you have to do it today. There'll be plenty of time for that. There'll be plenty of time to help.
I remember going down to New Orleans after Katrina hit. I wasn't expected to see what I saw, but we had done a collection for toys for Christmas for kids for the victims of Katrina, and we worked with Circuit World on that. And Michelle and I drove down there. She's the one who lives in Houston right now, and I just remember seeing all these cars that were basically total parked under overpasses and bridges. And I remember going into someone's basically destroyed house, and I saw that mud and just toilets that were just full of muddy water, and you could see the watermarks on the walls. And the spookiest thing I remember seeing is driving down this one street, one of the main streets, and they had the painted X's on the doors with numbers on them, and that was that they checked there, and how many people were found alive and how many people were found deceased in those homes from that. So that was a very chilling and disturbing moment for me, and it kind of made me realize, just watching this on the news does not do this justice. But to actually
until
be there,
you've been there, you see it, you smell it, you feel it, you really don't understand what people are going through.
And just seeing all these mosquitoes and all these insects, and like you said, the other animals that are now swimming in the streets, and that their bodies are still laying there afterwards. So it's a lot to clean up, and it's going to take a long time to to have this Houston area recover from this.
It is. And then, one of the things the Texas Association was putting out, not just to us, but to other states, was the mind to remember that once the waters come down and they need help out there, they may need law enforcement help. They may need officers from around the country to come down and volunteer to help out, just to keep law and order and maintain things. Our first thought is to think how awful it is about people looting and stealing stuff from people's homes and businesses and all that. But you've also got to understand that, you run into a situation where there's people that literally feel like they have no other option. They have no other choice, that they're not stealing from someone or a business because they want to make a profit or because they're greedy. They may steal from a business or from a home just because they are surviving. Right. And so you've got all those issues to deal with too down there. So, there's always that law and order aspect that comes in after that, the health and disease aspect and all these different things that come with that when you think about planning for these events and the efforts that go into that, it is just mind-boggling for our little area, much less when you think about a major city and you think about what needs to be done in the city aspect. So our thoughts and our prayers really go out to those people and to the police departments and sheriff's offices and to all the emergency workers and all those people down there, because something else that we don't think about too, these people that's maintaining law and order, these people that's running ambulances, these people that's on the fire departments and rescue squads and that are doing these things, that are out here helping other people, they may very well have lost their home too. Right. And they may very well have loved ones who have died in the disaster. And so even though they're hurting and even though they're suffering, they're still trying to put a foot forward to help their community and help their people. So we need to remember those folks down there too as they're dealing with that.
Absolutely. And when we talk about the donations, we don't in any way mean to discourage anyone from trying to help. But if you are taking up collections and things like that, make sure that you have a plan. Contact somebody down there that can accept those items and don't just go
that's
down
one
there.
thing that they do. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I meant to mention that a while ago, is the fact of I know there's some people in the area that's putting some trailers together, that's taking supplies to the Texas area, and that, like you say, that's perfectly okay. That's fine to do that. But please call ahead and make contact with emergency management down there to where you have a plan as to where you're going and where you're going to take it, and before you ever leave with that stuff, because you may very well drive to an area that is full and overflowing and they can't accept it, but there may be some other area that you could take it to that would welcome it and say this is what they need for that area. So if you're putting stuff like that together, whether you're a church or an organization, you're putting those supplies together, please try to make contact with emergency management down there in those cities that you plan on going, and making sure that you have a plan before you leave to get down there.
And Houston has been basically in the news because of its devastation and because of the size of the city, but there are surrounding areas there that have needs too.
There's multiple towns, multiple places there that it's in the same situation. Literally everything down from Corpus Christi on up even to the border up there in the I guess it's Louisiana border, up on that end. Basically everything on the coast and the inland within 100 miles up through there is in the same situation. So it don't necessarily have to go to Houston, because there's plenty of other towns and places that could use it.
I remember when we went down to New Orleans area after Katrina, there was this one island called, it's a Grand Isle, is I think a peninsula, and they were just totally devastated, but because they were not in New Orleans, that's where all the aid seemed to help, because that's what made the national news is New Orleans. But no one heard of this little town called Grand Isle. And we were talking with the mayor, rode around town with him. He showed us some stuff and showed us some of the people that that were in need but had never received any help at all. So just remember the surrounding areas too when helping, because those people are in just as much need.
And like I say, we one of the things that we don't want to see happen is we don't want to see those going down there to help and those going down there to help rescue. We know we have people that in the area in western North Carolina and East Tennessee and North Georgia that is taking boats to the area, and aircraft and everything else, just so they could help rescue people. One of the things is go prepared, and go prepared and take your food and take your drinks and take that stuff with you for yourself, because you don't want to tax the people down there with victims that have lost everything. You don't want to take food out of their mouth or take supplies away from them to take care of yourself while you're there. So if you plan on going for those purposes, like I say, schedule that, talk to emergency management, see what you could do. but try to be self-sufficient when you go so that you're not taxing them any more than what they're already taxed down there.
All right. Well, we actually had not even planned on talking about the Hurricane Harvey.
I was just going to eat my Bowberry biscuit and listen to how much.
But I'm glad we did. I think that's been a lot of good information for
Right.
folks locally, because it doesn't just affect that area where the tragedy happens. It affects everybody because we're all tied together, but we're not divided among race, gender, and all this. We're all Americans. We're all humans,
Right.
and we're here to help each other out. And when these disasters happen, we have to think, when this happens to us, are there going to be others that care enough about us to want to come to our aid
Right.
when we're in need? So it's one of those things, our neighbors in Texas and those areas, they're in need right now. So it does affect us. And we just want to offer our thoughts and prayers to everybody and who has been affected by this. And our communities are going to get together when the timing is right and try our best to help rebuild this area after this disaster.
I remember several years ago when the tornadoes came through Ringgold, Georgia, and all that down in there when that tornado outbreak. We went down, our church group went down and was helping remove trees and stuff from that area. And it was amazing to me just driving up down the streets and looking for places that we could help and help remove debris and things. It was amazing to me how many local people here from home that we ran into down there that did the same thing. They just went down there to help. And like I say, I think that speaks well to us as a nation. As many problems and things as we have in this nation, I think it speaks well that we're willing to sacrifice and go and help those that are in need. And down there in Texas, like I say, literally people from all over the United States has went to Texas to help them. And I just want to commend those that have taken that effort to go down there, and the ones that can't, that's helped financially, and those that have helped in prayers, and those that have helped in other ways. They are to be commended just as much as the ones that drove down there. So I just want to say how proud I am, to, even though our nation has problems, and even though we have situations that definitely need to be dealt with, how proud I am that we still live in a nation of people who care for one another.
Absolutely. All right, let's come back to the local front and talk about things. I know we've had a couple of press releases this week with some drug issues,
Right.
and let's talk about what a drug court. We don't have a drug court in our area, do we?
We currently do not have a drug court. That's something that we have been in conversation with the DA's office and the judicial system about. There's other issues when setting up a drug court that has to be overcome, as far as judges that are willing to change their schedules and come and volunteer for that and be a part of that court, because it's not a mandated state court.
It's just a completely separate court from our current court system, correct?
Right. It's not a mandated state court. So if we did a drug court or successfully did a drug court, it would take everything from judges volunteering to come and be a part of that drug court, to district attorney's office that would be willing to be a part of that, to attorneys willing to step up and be a part of it. So there's a lot of logistical things that has to be accomplished to make sure that we could do that. But that is something we've been in negotiations about and talks about over the last couple of years, and trying to get that accomplished. In the meantime, let me back up and say this before I go on to the next thing. People wonder, what is drug court? What does drug court do? Well, there's a lot of different ways you can do drug court, but the Cliff Note version pretty much of this is that if you get charged with possessions, misdemeanors, those low grade drug charges, that's not major cases, it's not major felonies and drug trafficking and those kind of things, but it's the low level possession type and paraphernalia cases. You have an opportunity to participate in drug court, where you can go get counseling, get rehabilitation, get these certain things that the court system can set up for you. And upon successful completion of those things, you can see those charges dismissed and done away with. And so we're looking at alternative ways to try to help people get help. But with that being said, in the meantime, while we're waiting on this getting accomplished and getting done, I think eventually we will have a drug court. But And in the meantime, while we're waiting on that, we are working with other groups. I mentioned it, I think, a couple of weeks ago with High on Hope Ministries and out of Ohio that's coming down and done some training. They made a second trip down here. Unfortunately, I was unable to make the second meeting. I had other obligations. But come down here and meeting with churches, and we're hopefully going to start a program within our jail with High on Hope and with some other ministries that will help people through rehabilitation and help them start a program while they're incarcerated that they can follow through with once they're out. They've got different 12-step programs. You got Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, and High on Hope itself has a 12-step program that's a combination of both of those, but it's biblical based, and it's called it's basically a drug rehabilitation program, High on Hope, and it's through Christ, 12 Steps Through Christ of Recovery. And basically what we're working with them is to get some training on that so we can start that program within the jail facility itself, to where those that are willing to participate in the program can start the 12-step program while they're incarcerated. But once they're released out of jail, that we'll have churches that are doing the same programs within their churches, to where they can go to the church to continue that program out. So if they're in jail and they're only on the third step or the third week of the meeting, and they were to make bond or get out or things of that nature, then they were able to continue that on once they made bond, once they got out of courts or out of jail to finish up those rehabilitation things. And the High on Hope Ministries also follows that up with other things, not just the 12-step program, but they help anybody that wants to get into a rehab center somewhere in the country that they can find a bed. They also do follow-up programs, weekly meetings, things of that nature, to keep these people involved and to keep them going so that they don't just do a 12-week program and then just give them a certificate and never see them again. But they keep them involved and keep them going and recovering and training. So I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited about getting it going here, and so that we can offer up an alternative to maybe help some people get off drugs and to change that part of their life.
There are a lot of people that are addicted to drugs that sincerely and genuinely do want off of drugs, but just can't get on their own that to happen.
Right.
So that does sound like a great program. And as far as the drug court itself, if that is something that comes, would that reduce the traffic and the burden of our local court system by having that separated?
It would take a lot of those cases out of the local court system and put into a drug court system.
Approximately what percentage?
I would be afraid to say because I don't know, but I would say a majority of the cases, because those type of cases is kind of what clogs up, especially our district court system, is those possession cases, paraphernalias, and those low-grade drug cases. You could even take other crimes that's occurred but are drug-related, such as if you had maybe a string of breaking and enterings that occurred, but it's because someone was strung out on drugs and was high when they were doing it. That if even if it's drug related, it could be moved into drug court to get help within that drug court system. And so there's a lot of different ways you can do it, a lot of different avenues you could do it. But like I say, it's a lot of logistical things involved in that has to be sorted out before it can be implemented. One of the other things I know that they have explored and been looking at within the court system is the veterans court, and trying to help our local veterans that may be addicted to drugs and other problems, whether it may be PTSD and other things, of getting them into a court system to where they have the same opportunities. If they're a veteran and they've been charged with a low-grade crime, that they have an opportunity to get some counseling, get some help, and get medication straightened out and all those kind of things. And if they're willing to go through that and get that done and get some help, then they can get help with their charges. And so I'm just excited about what our future holds and some things that could potentially be coming down the pike later on. But I think anything we can do as a community to help our people get off the drugs and help them get out of these situations, to help them alter their life and change their life, then that only benefits the entire community and it benefits society. So I told a girl this week that we got on the traffic stop. I was standing on the side of the road talking with her, and I tried to explain this to her. I said, if I could go up and down people's houses, and she had been in drugs before. She had gotten clean. She had gotten help, and then had fallen back into drugs, and now she got caught again. And I told her if I could walk up down the street and knock on people's doors and just say, would you please stop using drugs and get some help, and would take the help and get them clean, I would never put another person in jail. That's all I would do, is help people get clean and help them get off the drugs, because that is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to stop the problem. The ultimate goal is to get the problem fixed, not to just continually arrest people and put them in jail, and then they make bond or serve their time and get out, and let's do it all over again. And literally, we have people that's sitting in jail right now that I dealt with over 20 years ago on the same things, same kind of charges, same kind of drugs, same kind of things they were doing 20 years ago, that they're still in jail today, and it's just a revolving door just coming in and out. And an analogy I've used before, and I think it's very pertinent, is that the clinical definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Right. So as a government, if we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect things to get better, we're fooling ourselves, and we're technically displaying a form of insanity. So we want to do things differently. We want to look for alternative ways and alternative methods to try to help our community.
I think our community has really had their eyes open about how much drug activity there is in our county, and not just our county, but
right.
If you go to WKRK's Facebook page, and we share our surrounding
right.
counties as well, and how much activity there is. And I'm not good at the math on this. We had shared a press release from Fox, Carolina, that 3 Bryson City people were arrested in Jackson County, North Carolina.
Right.
They had 110 grams of meth. How much is that? Is that a lot? Or
that's a lot. That's getting up close to the high level trafficking. It's not quite made high level yet, but it's in the mid range. It takes 28 grams to get in trafficking levels. That's the low level is 28 grams. So if they've had 110 grams, they've had quite a bit. Yeah.
Size-wise, would that like fit in a gallon bucket?
About a gallon bag.
Gallon bag?
Yeah, something like that.
And how many uses? Is that like a use for dozens of people? Or?
Well, that amount is, like I say, it's not for use, it's for sale. And so the problem with it is that you may, if we seize an ounce or we seize 50 grams or 100 grams, whatever it may be, that person their intention may have been of cutting that with a different source, whether it's Epsom salt or sugar or anything else, and cutting it with a different substance and making more of it. So it's kind of hard to track how many people could potentially use it, because it depends on how much they added to it and how much they cut it down and those kind of things. So
it's kind of like watering down.
It's watering down something, yeah.
Okay.
So you never knew what their intention would be with it, whether to sell it like it is or whether it's to cut it down with other things and make more of it. We've actually had people here that we've caught with 4 or 5 ounces of meth, but caught them with other substances. Their intention was to cook it down and mix it with other stuff and make a pound out of it, or a pound and a half or half a pound. And so it's really hard to judge what that usage amount is, because you just don't know what it potentially could be.
I know our time's getting limited, but let's talk about people who have never, ever experienced getting arrested, going to jail, and what their families, if somebody has never been arrested, then they go and do the bail. What is that whole process that family has to go through? Because I know there's not an easy to follow step 1, step 2, this thing.
Like when you're in law enforcement, judicial system, everything becomes second nature, so it's pretty easy to you. But for the person that's never been through it before, it's kind of overwhelming to them. When a person is arrested and they're taken to the detention center, the law says you must take them in front of a judicial official without delay. Most of the time, they're taken in front of a magistrate. And the purpose of that is you have to take them in front of that magistrate. You have to testify in front of that magistrate as to why you arrested them, what the circumstances was. The magistrate has to determine whether there was probable cause for that arrest or not. If they determine there was probable cause for that arrest and you made a legal arrest, then the next step in that is the magistrate sets what they feel like is the appropriate bond. One thing about magistrates is they're an independent judicial official, so they have guidelines that are set down by the state, by the Superior Court Justice, that gives them guidelines as what's appropriate bonds. But because they're an independent judicial official, they set the bonds they feel is appropriate, whatever that may be. And there's a lot of factors that play into that as to whether the person's local, whether they've had a record, whether they have a history of fleeing from court, those type of things. So there's a lot of factors can play into that bond, whether it's secured or unsecured, whether you have to put money up or not. And a lot of people don't understand the fact of they may have one person that was arrested for possession of cocaine and they got a $50,000 bond secured, had to put money up. Somebody else may get a charge of possession of cocaine. They may get a $10,000 unsecured and get to walk out the door. A lot of people get upset about that and they don't realize that, but there's a lot of factors the magistrates have to play into that to determine what's the appropriate bond on that and whether their likelihood of showing up for court.
And again, the bond is not punishment.
It's not punishment.
It's just to ensure that they get the money back, right? If that person shows up for court,
right.
It's like a security deposit.
Yeah, the only reason that bond is made, the only reason there's money put down is the fact of that it gives people motivation to show up for court.
Right.
And if they show up for court, then that bond is returned back to the person that put up the bond. So it's just motivation if they show up for court. If they don't show up for court, then it's forfeited, and the court system gets to keep the money. So that's all that bond is for. It's not set there to try to hold somebody in jail or to keep them in jail. But once that bond's set, the person has to either go through the clerk's office or go through the magistrate's office, them or their family, and has to make that appropriate bond. If it's a secured bond, basically they have to have property in Cherokee County worth that amount. I think it's that amount plus. I don't remember how much more that property has to be worth. But also there's other ways of doing that. They can put up a cash bond for the amount, or they can contact a bondsman and make that bond through a monetary amount there to the bondsman. They pay the bondsman so much. It's usually 10 or 15% of whatever the bond is, and the bondsman makes the rest of the bond for the person. So, but you lose that money if you go through a bondsman. Whatever you pay him, you've just lost it. But the bondsman takes the risk. The bondsman puts the bond up, gets them out, and they take the risk of getting them out. So
that's the risk fee.
Right, yeah. And so that person has to do that through the magistrate, or other judicial official. But the thing about that also, there's also a process at the jail you have to go through booking process, fingerprints, photographs, biographical information, those type of things that is done there at the jail. And so it may take a little while to get through that. So, but technically and by the law, legally, once a magistrate signs a blue sheet or a judicial official signs it and says a person is free to go and they're released, we have no legal authority to hold them beyond that point. So it's up to us in the detention center to go through our release process to get them out of there. So just like we take them in front of a magistrate without delay, we should release them without delay. And so I know that's been an issue over the years with other sheriff's offices and even our office before I took office, about people getting bond set and then them having to stay in jail for another day or whatever. And that's just not appropriate. If the magistrate says they're to be released, they're to be released. So, but that's in a nutshell kind of the process people go through, and it can get a little bit more difficult than that. But then you have court dates, you have to show up for court, and they get an attorney appointed and all those kind of things. And if you don't have money to hire your own attorney.
What about the victims of crimes? How are they helped?
Well, we have a victims advocacy unit within the sheriff's office. Primarily, it's designed for domestic violence victims and victims of domestic violence, but they will help any victim. When we go out and we have deaths that occur within the community, whether it's homicide, suicide, or just natural death, our victims advocacy unit works with those folks to help them get the appropriate resources and things they need. Other victims of other crimes, whether it's sexual assault crimes, child crimes, those type of things, our unit works with those folks to help them go through the court process, to kind of sit with them and be with them through court and those kind of things. So that unit does a lot to help the victims through there. And there's a whole victims' right bill that's being passed through state right now. It's an upgrade on the bill, which I signed as a supporter of that bill. And so hopefully that'll be going through legislation pretty soon and get signed and give the victims additional rights as to what the court system will do or won't do with those people once they're deemed a victim of a crime. So.
Okay, so anybody who is a victim of the crime and just clueless of what's going on, they can just ask for the Victims Advocacy
Unit. And Stephanie Swanson is the director of that.
She's been there for a while, hasn't she?
She's been there for probably close to 13 years now, I guess. 12 or 13
She's
years.
not that old.
Nah. Yeah.
All right.
I will tell you a funny little thing about Stephanie, though, and she's listening. I can remember when Stephanie was born. Her mom and dad went to our church, and I can remember when she was born, and they brought her to church. So that shows you how old I am.
You are getting old, aren't you?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else before we wrap up the show?
No, I just want to wish everybody, what is coming up? Labor Day, right?
Labor Day weekend.
A happy Labor Day, and if you go out camping or get on the lake or anything like that, just be careful.
Oh, that's another thing about camping. The Forest Service is waiving all fees for people that have been impacted by Harvey. So because we probably will see some people from that area come to our local area, and if the people that are needing a place to camp, the Forest Service is waiving the campground fees for those who are affected by Harvey. So just want to pass that on out there because we may have people listening to us on the internet right now, from that area, or even maybe some people in the area. I know when we had Katrina, we had a lot of people from Katrina up here.
Yeah. So it would not surprise me. I know there was one family on the news that somebody had just moved Oklahoma or to Houston the week before from West Virginia, and they had lost everything. They had just moved into their house, had only been there a week, and had lost everything. And so they were discussing going back to West Virginia. So I'm sure there's other people in those situations that'll be going back to
just looking to relocate
somewhere.
All right, Sheriff. Thank you very much. We'll do this again and have more fun next week, same time, same place.
Thank you.
All right. You're tuned to 105.5 FM, 1320 AM, cable TV channel 25, and worldwide at country.am.